Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another short story versus episode video. And today we're going to be discussing the Haunted House game, short story versus episode. Yeah, I know this DVD says Scary House, but on the back it reveals that it says the Haunted House game is included. Now, if we're going on short story terms, I gave the short story a 5 out of 5, but to be fair, I don't really do specific grades when there's a collection of short stories together. I kind of do 0.5 increments. So a 5 out of 5 for the short stories is still a really good score. It's basically perfect. But it doesn't really correlate well when we're doing episodes sometimes. And this is one of those cases where these are like really close for me. The episode I gave a 4.7 out of 5 a while back. I love this episode so much. I think there's a lot of creativity. I love the changes, and I love that it offers something completely different to come to in the show compared to the source material. And honestly, I think they're both phenomenal. If you have not tried these off the bat, before we go any further, if you have not tried either version here, pick up this short story collection, or maybe pick up the 30 Tales to Give You Goosebumps bind up, and try this short story out, and then go and watch this episode on like Netflix, or if you have the DVD, or you want to purchase the episode individually, wherever, go watch these and read this short story. This is amazing either way you go. Now, both versions are drastically different. This is like, when I say in name only adaptation of the short story, this is an in name only adaptation. Literally, it's so different. They might as well be just two different stories here. The only commonality is they have the same character names, and that's about it. Everything else is different. And honestly, this is going to be so hard to compare these because they're so different. This is probably going to be the hardest one to declare. I'm just going to be honest. And I haven't even made my mind up if I have a favorite or not by the end of this video. I might have an idea. If not, I'm probably just going to, do the inevitable. And you can guess what that is. But, anywho, in these short story / book versus episode videos, I like to go over the characters. That's basically the first thing I go and touch on. Then I talk about the atmosphere. Since these two are totally different, we're going to be discussing tone in this video. Which tone do I prefer? If I do prefer either one. Doesn't really have different aesthetic, so we don't have to even worry about that. But, so like I said, we're going to be doing characters, atmosphere, tone, and then we're going to be doing overall plot. Which one has a better overall plot, or a scarier plot, whatever the case may be, however I'm feeling. Then we're going to be doing the climax, and then the ending itself. Now, for this is so different. I guess we'll start with the characters. We'll start with Jonathan and Nadine. Kind of go over them individually here. So, let's start with Nadine. So, in the short story, Nadine is kind of just a supporting character. Not really an important person. She's just kind of there helping Jonathan babysit his twin siblings, Noah and Annie. And she's kind of like the reluctant friend that goes along with Jonathan's plan throughout the night. And she is a part of a very scary event that goes on. The episode now, she's more of the leader character in the episode. She is the one that kind of drags Jonathan throughout the story. She has much more of a pronounced character to her. She has more confidence. She goes through kind of a, if you even want to call it a character arc, I kind of consider it a character arc, but she goes from this, I want to say pompous, but kind of like, full of herself, and then she gets kind of humbled by the end through her experience playing the Haunted House game here. So, when it comes to Nadine, I think I prefer the episode, and most likely I'm probably going to end up preferring the episode for most of the characters here, only because the episode, especially for Jonathan and Nadine, actually give them character depth. So, so Nadine goes to the episode. And I guess we'll talk about Jonathan, too. Jonathan is the main character in the short story. Jonathan's the one who pulls up the Haunted House game to play, and he's the older brother to Noah and Annie, best friend of Nadine. And what he goes through in the story is pretty scary, but you don't really get a sense of his character. Now, in the episode, he's played by a really annoying actor, Benjamin Plenner. He has a really annoying actor playing him, and that's really what takes it back for me for this episode being perfect. Honestly, I think it's just Benjamin Plenner ruins this episode, kind of. it's so, I don't know. It's such a 50-50 thing here. Sometimes I might be in the mood to take short story version Jonathan, and then if I have to watch the episode Jonathan, I'm like, you know what? I like his character when he goes through, but I hate this actor and how he's playing Jonathan. So, I guess if I had a preference, though, to be real, I probably prefer the episode Jonathan, only because you see more depth with him. He does a lot more. He starts as this, like, fraidy cat. He's just like a little wimp. And then he kind of morphs into being brave by the end. He gets a little more braver. Even, you know, I would say braver than Nadine. So, yeah. I'll give the episode to Jonathan. Now we'll go over Noah and Annie. Noah and Annie in the short story are Jonathan's twin siblings that are younger. And they play part in the story because they're being babysat and they're part of the experience in this scary house while this game is being played, and the game is unleashing all this terror into the house. As in the episode, Noah and Annie are these random kids trapped in this board game because they're so different. I haven't even got to the plot yet, and this will start making sense when I get to the plot part. But they're trapped in this board game. They're not siblings at all. They're not even related to Jonathan. And they're trying to help, I guess, Jonathan and Nadine escape with them. And then they're kind of revealed to, you know, there's a Deus Ex Machina portion of this episode near the end that kind of reveals something else with them. But that's essentially their characters. They're just side characters. And honestly, I can't really decide here, so I'm going to deadlock them. They're both fine as is. I think I might slightly lean towards the episode a little more just because there's a really fun scene with Noah getting sucked into a laundry basket. And I guess for Annie, I guess I'm still going to deadlock him, but I think for Noah, slightly I'll give it to the episode. Now, there's also other characters that are not in the short story in the episode, and I'll kind of run them down. They're all going to be going to the episode here. The girl outside the house, and these ghost creature things that are inside the board game. Holy crap. This is like some pretty scary stuff. These were great additions, especially the little girl. My goodness, by the end, the ending to this episode, it's permanently etched into my brain for how creepy for that girl is. So, yeah, the girl and those ghosts, yeah. It's going to the episode because they're not in the short story, but they were still fantastic here. So that's about it for characters. Next we're going to get into is the atmosphere. Which one had a better atmosphere? Now, the book is very creepy. You know, it's a dark and stormy night. There's no parents around. There's a bunch of stuff happening as they're playing this board game. You get this really tense feeling that everything's about to close in on them. Like, if a short story has ever made me feel claustrophobic in Goosebumps, and I'm kind of claustrophobic myself, that's one of my phobias, yeah, this story feels claustrophobic. Like, every time something else happens in the story, it gets progressively tighter, progressively more, I don't know, anxiety-inducing. It gets scary. Like, it's very tense. And the way this book builds atmosphere is this short story builds atmosphere is phenomenal. The episode, this is just a fun atmosphere. Jonathan and Nadine stumble across this house in their neighborhood, walking home from filming something, and they see this little girl who's lost her cat inside the house, and they go inside of this old, decrepit mansion type of place, and they find this board game, and they're sucked into this board game that looks really fun. It's very campy in 90s. I'm not going to lie, it's very campy in 90s, but it's very fun, and it has a totally different atmosphere going for it. But, yeah, this is really creepy, too, because the board game, when they roll the dice in this, it takes them to, like, this pocket dimension type of thing where they have to deal with these scary situations to find these items that will help them escape the game near the end. And it's just a fun way to go about it. And they're both so great at what they do individually. I'm going to tie them here because they're just great either way. Really love the atmosphere in both of these. I could not really decide which one I like more, honestly. So, great. Really great stuff. Now, the tone here, the tone is kind of like how they go about doing the story. The short story is easily trying to be scary. It's trying to creep you out, especially with that twist. The twist in this short story makes this short story, I think, the best short story in the whole Tales to Give You Goosebumps selection. Out of the 60 stories they put out in this series, I think the Haunted House game is easily the best one. I have yet to see people not like that short story, and the ending is what makes that short story what it is. It is great. It's creepy. It builds to this point, and it just ends perfectly. There's nothing wrong with the short story. The episode is just a fun, campy episode. It actually is scary, and it does lean into some humor. It's kind of unintentionally funny because of Benjamin Plenner, to be honest. But there's some scary stuff in this episode, too. I'm not trying to knock the episode. This episode, the ghosts in this episode are scary. And for some reason, when I watch this episode, I get this vibe that if Rob Zombie had ever done anything for the Goosebumps show, it would be this episode. This episode is just wild, it's zany, it's fun, and that's the tone it's going for. It's scary, fun, all in one. But they both do the tone great as well, but if I had a preference, I actually do have one here. I like the short story's tone just a little bit more, because the ending makes this short story so perfect. I have to give props to that. It did not break the tone whatsoever. It was great. So I'm going to give the edge to the short story there. So now we're going into the overall plot. Okay, kind of scratch the surface a little bit. So, kind of run it down one more time for the short story. The short story, the four kids, Jonathan, Nadine, and the twins, are in a house one stormy night. Jonathan pulls out this haunted house board game. They don't want to play it, but they decide to do it because they're bored. Their parents aren't home. There's nothing else to do. Then it starts storming, and Jonathan gets scared. They make fun of him, and then while he's being made fun of, he rolls the dice, and he's already in an intense mood. And once the piece moves on his board game to the spot, floorboards start creaking, and it creeps everyone out, gets everybody in this scared mood. And as each player takes their turn, you start hearing windows rattling, every single window in the house. You start hearing loud moaning noises coming from this upstairs. You hear this scream in the attic. You hear this bony smashing, like a bony hand smashing on the window, and all this tension just builds up so perfectly, and it ends on possibly one of my favorite endings of all time in Goosebumps. It is just crazy. It's very similar to the Ghost Next Door twist, but it adds its own flavor to it. And then it's also kind of comical and lighthearted at the same time, and it's just so perfect. That's essentially the plot there. And then in the episode, it's just Jonathan and Nadine. They stumble across this little girl who's crying in front of this old, decrepit mansion, saying that her cat walked inside and she can't find her cat. And Nadine, kind of drags Jonathan into the mansion. And as they're walking, they find this board game, and they get sucked into this board game, and they have to play to get out. And when they play this game, it takes them to like pocket dimensions where they encounter these scary ghost things in order to retrieve items that they can use later on to get out of the board game. And they get to a certain point, and they discover the characters of Noah and Annie, who are also stuck in the board game. And it leads up to the climax where they think they're getting out, and then something happens, a big twist happens, and they kind of luck out, and then the ending ends with that iconic girl staring in the camera thing. So good. So good. So, like I said, the plot here, very different. There's no being sucked into a board game in the short story. It's just the board game is kind of unleashing stuff into the house they're in. The episode's very different. The characters are dealt differently. They have different character arcs. But they're, like I said, they're both equal in so many ways. I'm going to actually tie the plots here. If I had a slight preference, I actually have a slight preference for the episode's plot entirely. I think it's fun. I think it's atmospheric. And I think it captures me a little bit more. Not taking anything away from the short story. If I had one, I'd give it to the episode, but I'm going to deadlock them because they're so good in so many ways and so equal to me. I'm just going to tie them. Okay? And now we have the climax. The climax in the short story is basically all the stuff keeps building up, and then there's a knock at the door, or they hear something at the door, and Jonathan goes and he picks up something that reveals what's going on. And then in the episode, the climax is once after Jonathan and Nadine make it through the game and meet Annie and Noah. The climax is them trying to figure out how to use these items to get out of the board game, and then it leads up to this big reveal, and then they have to overcome that, and that's essentially the climax. So the climax here, if I had a preference, I'd probably lean to the episode. I'm probably going to give it to the episode here. I think the episode has a fun climax, especially given the hijinks there. But if I had to give anything to the short story, that tension is still there in the climax. I don't even think this one really has one, to be honest. It doesn't really have a climax. It just continues all the way to the end. So to be fair, I actually probably would give it to the episode just because the book doesn't really feel like it has one. So there you go. And then the ending, going back to the book, I guess what I shared about the climax is kind of the ending too, where there's a sound at the door and Jonathan goes to investigate, and there's a big revelation to the story, and it's really creepy. It's super creepy. And then in the episode, the ending is, after the twist happens, Jonathan and Nadine have to figure out now how to escape wherever they are, and they may or may not succeed. And then there's a pan-out shot of this little girl that's etched in my brain. Now, if I have a preference for ending, I'm probably going to give it to the book. Like I said, the book has one of the best endings I've ever read in Goosebumps. It's so great. It makes the short story so good. Not taking anything from the episode. The episode's ending is still great too. But I have to give it to the short story. This was fun. This was so great. So, if I had a preference, which one is superior? I don't do this often, but honestly, I cannot decide. So I'm going to deadlock them here. I think they're both evenly matched. Both of these are great. Honestly, go pick up this short story. Go pick up this book just to read the short story. This is fantastic. And go find a way to watch this episode. This is so much fun. It's so great. So great. Either way you go, this is fun. It's going to give you two totally different takes on the story, and you're going to have a blast either way. I'm hard confident on that. I do know some people are not a fan of this episode. It kind of is divisive for some, but just know that before you go into the episode. But I've never heard any complaints about the short story. Seriously, try both of these. This is a book franchise, though. I do recommend that you read the short story first and then watch the episode. I did not include this. And if you also want to see a third version of the Haunted House game, you can check out the Totally Fox Kids Magazine 23. You can find a scan on that online and see this version, the third version of the Haunted House game. There's 3 versions. They're all fun. Go check it out. And let me know down in the comment section, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the short story or do you prefer the episode? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.